Not that I haven't done this.
All right. It's all right. It's a similar rodeo, different horses. All right, let's call together this October 14th meeting of the Fairfax County Architectural Review Board. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA, the ARB needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of this ARB is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating, that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each ARB member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. All right, we'll go down our standard lineup. Ms. Aubrey?
Yes, this is Michelle Aubrey, and I am in my residence in the Mount Vernon district. Thank you. And so far I can hear you fine.
All right, Mr. Burns.
This is John Burns. I am in my house in the future Holland Hills Historic Overlay District, and I can hear everyone who's spoken so far just fine.
All right, Ms. Wan.
Yes, this is Samantha Huang, and I'm at home in Reston, and I can hear everyone well and fine, clear so far.
Thank you. Mr. Kolinsky.
Yep, Steve Kolinsky here in my office in Alexandria, Virginia, and I can hear and see fine.
All right, Ms. Murray.
Elise Murray in my residence in Vienna, Virginia.
Ms. Orr.
So Miss Orr chatted that her microphone isn't working currently, and I tried unmuting her on my end, and it was unsuccessful. It doesn't seem to be working. I would suggest that she go back out and come back in and see if that resolves the problem.
All right. Okay, I would suggest trying that. For the moment, we'll note that you are online, but we cannot yet confirm nor hear you. Mr. Plumpy.
Sure, I heard you loud and clear. I'm from my residence in Fairfax Station, Virginia, the southern glorious part of Fairfax County.
Mr. Zellman.
Jason Zellman at my residence in Burke, Virginia, and I can hear everybody just fine.
All right, and I'm Christopher Daniel. I'm presenting from my residence in Reston. At this point, I will hand the virtual gavel to our illustrious vice chairman so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. Mr. Zellman. I move that every member's voice is adequately heard by every other member of this ARB, with the exception at this moment of Ms. Orr, who may attempt to rejoin us once her mic is working.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a second. I believe that is Mr. Burns. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? And the motion carries.
All right, as determined by the roll call, 8 members of this ARB are present and therefore satisfy the ARB quorum minimum. The ARB bylaws state that a minimum of 6 members are required to determine a quorum. It is so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second that.
All right, there were a couple seconds in there. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Any abstentions? And the motion carries.
All right, third, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must now establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this ARB to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And that as such, FOIA's usual procedures which require physical assembly of the ARB and the physical presence of the public cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the ARB may conduct this meeting electronically through WebEx, a county virtual meeting platform, and available for access through the ARB County website or through the phone at 1-844-621-3956 with the access code 2344-145-6612. It is so moved.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Wong. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries.
All right. I'll note right now as well that Ms. Kay Orr has joined us, and our count can actually be moved up from 8 to 9 members because I was able to see and hear her. Ms. Orr, if you want to just say where you're speaking from.
My home in Alexandria.
Thank you very much, ma'am. All right. Second to last, excuse me. It is next required for all matters to be addressed on today's agenda that are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and discharge this board's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Orr. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? And the motion carries.
Lastly, the ARB needs to determine how long each member of the public will be able to speak during public comment periods. The public will be allowed to comment after consent agenda items and after each action item as the standard ARB practice. I move that each member of the public will have 3 minutes to speak.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Ms. Orr again, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? And the motion carries. And the gavel back to Chairman.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Zellman. All right. That follows our special COVID-19 motions. Staff, would you like to share any information about WebEx and virtual meeting attendance policies?
I would if I knew what we were talking about. Virtual meeting attendance policies, let's see.
Denise.
Yes.
Yes, Laura, I'm happy to do it. It's just to give everyone a heads up, not for the ARB members, but for anyone that's listening in. You are muted right now and you don't have camera privileges, but when your presentation turn comes up, we will upgrade you to a panelist. And if you have questions, there's a Q&A and a chat function on the bottom right where you can chat one of us and staff will take note of your concern. So that's all it is, Denise.
Thank you, Laura.
There you go. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Denise. Next, when we begin any ARB meeting, we usually like to start it with the reading of the statement of purpose and intent of historic overlay districts. I did not ask if there would be a volunteer, but is there any member that would like to read those statement of purpose?
Sure.
All right.
I
By all means, Mr. Zellman.
All right. Statement of purpose and intent of historic overlay districts. Historic overlay districts are created for the purpose of promoting the general welfare, education, economic prosperity, and recreational pleasure of the public through the perpetuation of those general areas or individual structures and premises that have been officially designated by the Board of Supervisors as having historical, cultural, architectural, or archaeological significance. Regulations within such districts are intended to protect against destruction of or encroachment upon such areas, structures, and premises, encourage uses which will lead to their continuation, conservation, and improvement in a manner appropriate to the preservation of the cultural, social, economic, political, architectural, or archaeological heritage of the county, to prevent creation of environmental influences adverse to such purposes, and to assure that new structures and uses within such districts will be in keeping with the character to be preserved and enhanced.
Thank you, Mr. Zellman. All right, I remind, we have a light agenda, but I remind applicants presentations should try to be limited to 8 minutes for our first presentation. And I think our workshop is staff driven and the staff knows well what our feelings are about efficiency. With that in mind, we have a agenda that was shared with everyone. I would ask potentially for a friendly amendment to that agenda that we add to it an item in administrative of a discussion on our bylaws request as well as member reappointments. And if that is acceptable to all, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda with that addendum.
Also move.
All right. Seconded by Miss Aubrey. All those in favor of my proposed revised agenda?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Indicate with nay. Abstentions? Hearing none, the agenda passes as proposed. All right, next on our agenda, introduction and recognition of guests. Staff, Denise, do we have any guests that we need to recognize?
There is somebody on the line named Hem Reyna, and I'm going to unmute you now. I tried to speak with you before the meeting, but if you could state your purpose, if you're here with an applicant or an application, or whether you're here as a guest.
Hi, this is Hemrana. I represent the Blackwell Group. Actually,
Thank
Channing
you.
Channing Black will have to join. I'm contacting him, and we have a presentation. So I'm
Thank you
trying to
so
call
much.
him. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Denise. Other than that, I don't think we have any other guests other than county staff that we all know and love. So let's move on with our agenda. The first item on the agenda is the consent calendar action items. We have one item on the consent calendar action items. Before I call for a potential motion on this, Denise, is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this item?
I do not believe so. There is no member of the public here to comment on the
There we go. That makes it solves it a little easier there. If so, I would obviously entertain discussion or a motion for approval by any one of the members. Anybody?
Mr. Chairman,
That's Miss Aubrey.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the ARB approve consent item ARB 21-SUL-03 as submitted and presented at the October 14, 2021 ARB meeting. Upon review of the materials, the proposal is found to meet requirements of zoning ordinance 3101 historic overlay districts.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Not sure who got to that one first. I think it was Mr. Zellman, I believe.
Oh, I don't know. I think Steve beat me on that one.
All right, well, then we'll say Mr. Kalinsky with a second there. It's a close call. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed by saying nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Consent item is approved. If the applicant is here, Denise will get with you following approval and following the end of this meeting sometime later this week or next. Moving on, for our completed consent calendar items, we move on to items for action. We have one item for action. It is ARB 21 CRM 01, new pool site plan located at 1089 Mill Run Court, Great Falls in the Colvin Run Historic Overlay District, tax map 0191130038. The applicant's proposing the addition of a pool and pool deck. This is presented by the Blackwell Group, which includes, I believe, Channing Blackwell, Youssef Ugbugham. I'm sorry if I butchered that, and Angela Helton of the Blackwell Group.
This is Channing Blackwell. You did a great job pronouncing Youssef's last name. Well done.
Thank
and
you.
I'll be helping out this evening.
All right, I believe Denise will be able to give you all presentation abilities if you want something to present, and otherwise the floor is yours, Mr. Blackwell.
I am.
Yes, I was just wondering if you needed me to call up the presentation or if you had it for yourself. If
You're very kind to
yourself.
offer, and I will take you up on that offer. I'm a remote on phone, so if I have the presentation on my phone, but yes, if you would please, thank you.
Sure. Wait, I made you a presenter, so there we go. I need to.
I'm as powerful as an Apple phone is. I don't think I can present.
No, no, that's okay. I'm taking it back.
Okay.
You'll just let Denise know what needs to
Perfect.
be displayed. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
All right. So, as mentioned, we are at 1098 Millfield Court in Great Falls regarding the proposed pool and deck on slide 2. We have the property address and tax map. We are at 36,000 square feet, which puts us kind of in a unique relative to zoning, but this is relative to what you can do with a lot. But regarding the ARB, we are R1 in Drainsville, and we have Colvin Mill is our overlay. The existing features are pretty standard. We have our existing home, driveway, walkways, patio, and we have a rear yard pavilion. The family would like to take on slide 3.
Yep.
If you look to the north in your upper right hand corner of your slide, you'll see the north arrow pointing to your right as you look at the slide, and that is your rear yard. And so the driveway entrance is from Millfield Court to the east, moving west up to the main residence. Hesseck Court is to your south, and so we have a traditional corner lot. The next slide is part of Blackwell Group services. The reason why this image looks so rich, if you will, in color and so forth. One of the features that we have within our organization is UAV and ortho imagery. So this is a recent flight. Worry not, all of our operators are FAA trained and certified. So again, we see Millfield, in this case on our right, Hesseck and Mill Run bottom and left. And you see the pavilion that was referenced earlier in existing features. The pavilion is to the right as you look of the blue, what do they call it? My children love so much. Bouncy things, whatever they are in the rear. Trampolines. So the next image will show the overlay district. And our site is to the right of your image. And it has a rev cloud in red around it.
Denise, is there any way you could zoom in a little bit on some of those images?
Yep.
Just to make it a little easier. I think Ms. Murray chimed in with a question about that just so we can see it a little better.
Sorry, I can't see anybody while I'm.
That's all right. And just use the little hand tool to move it over there, so I think it would help.
I put it in the chat, which I assume somebody was monitoring.
I was Elise.
I wasn't, okay.
Apparently Laura is too, but
Okay, that's why, anyway, that's what I did.
sorry there, Mr. Blackwell. Please feel free to continue.
No worries at all. I'm trying to be mindful of the speed and efficiency that was noted earlier in 8 minutes. So our next slide is the proposing of the addition. And let's be mindful that the word addition is not an addition. It's just an accessory structure of an 18-foot by 40-foot pool with pool deck all on grade. It will connect with the existing patio. And we will have a minor landscaping wall that will be under 3 feet. Typically, we'll call those a sitting wall. As you can imagine, a family sitting around a pool and being able to kind of sit on that wall, if you will, less than 3 feet, which does not require a building permit I know that's not an ARB issue, just to note there. But the minor landscaping walls are just sitting walls. We will be under relative land disturbance. These are just kind of notes. Under 5,000 square feet, specifically 3,777 square feet, which would classify it as minor construction. Just to note there, we are not removing any existing trees or screening. And the increase in the impervious area, including the pool, will be approximately 4%. Next slide.
Mm.
The blue rectangle is the 18-foot by 40-foot proposed pool, roughly in rear yard, side yard, but roughly rear yard. Again, connecting, as mentioned earlier, into the existing patio. The next slide would be, we're in essence doing minor to no grade change. So relative to projection, line of sight, visible, we should have no topographic changes. As mentioned, we're kind of blending in, I guess would be the best word. We've already spoken about minor construction, and the landscaping will not be changed. We will be preserving the existing vegetation and natural screening. As we go through the 6 standards, which are important, we will be retaining the natural contour layout, preserving the existing trees and screening, and preserving site view. This is an in-ground pool on grade. We already spoke earlier about minor construction as classified under the Public Facilities Manual, separate issue, but just noted. And complies with zoning requirements under Standard 5. And again, proposes an existing topography and meshes. As we go to Standard 6, is again meeting the fencing requirements.
Got my head. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. You are okay. If we can go to the next slide, architectural review, which would be slide 10. Perfect. The archaeological survey data form has been completed, submitted, and reviewed, and staff have presented, confirmed no other archaeological work is required. Email to assist in review for the board is included. The next 2 slides, 11 and 12, are photos that staff at Blackwell Group have taken to assist with the board's review. In general, we're trying to convey that as we're looking upward, we're really not, as anyone would drive around the property, we're on grade, not changing any grade, if you will, existing or projecting, to the extent, as noted, the earlier sitting walls, minor landscaping walls. 12, you'll see the pavilion, and the second and kind of third are in view. And we'll obviously be well below. There's the trampoline in the back there with the blue cushion around it. So that kind of lets you, between that picture and the existing, looks like a holly, is roughly where the pool will be. Closing your slide 13, please. In our view, that the proposed addition, it meets the standards, and we no further archaeological study component. We're because we're largely on grade with the accessory structure, which is the pool, we'll be able to use the available screening. We are minor construction, and we ask for your review and approval of the application. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. Denise, have we gained any members of the public to have comment on this application?
I would have to stop sharing in order to see
That's
that,
fine.
but I can.
There's none. This is Laura. There's none. Sorry.
Thank
All
you, Laura.
Seeing as there are no members of the public at this time, I'm going to go around to our members. Start with always as wonderful, Miss Aubrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank Mr. Blackwell for the presentation. I really appreciate the fact that they submitted the archaeological survey data form, and I am very glad to hear that no additional work is necessary. And so I have no comments or any questions about the application otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Burns.
Denise, can you please put up the PDF file ARB 21-CRM-01 site plan mill field? I have a question about the middle of the left side of that drawing. So if you could zoom in on that. Is it possible to zoom in so that the pool is enlarged in the center of the image so everybody can see what I'm going to ask? Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so several questions. First is, I assume that the mustard colored line is a fence. And if so, is that inside or outside the existing plantings, specifically the coniferous stuff?
It would be in and around as required to make sure that we are not changing the screening as it currently exists.
Okay, so will it be on the street side of those that row of coniferous stuff that wraps around the current trampoline, or will it be on the pool side? I couldn't tell from the drawing.
The pool fencing will be on the house side, so the screening is shown or viewed from the community.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. And then I have a further question about you indicated in your presentation the minor less than 3 foot height landscaping walls, and I understand the upper one, the northern one at the end of the pool that has kind of a half circle in the middle of it. I understand that one, but I'm a little confused as to what the arrow that goes down. It appears to point to the lower edge of the pool, or does it point to that half round section down there?
It points, the minor landscaping wall is you have, if we'll look to the north, which is in your upper left hand corner of your screen. So the northern half moon, as you mentioned, is a minor landscaping wall. Sometimes they're designed just to allow guests to sit around and have a little bit of a place to rest, if you will, and watch the children play and so forth. To the south, you have roughly a quarter moon, and that's mainly for again the same feature.
Okay, and the design intent there is for that wall to continue right up to the edge of the pool, right? There's no walk space between that wall and the corner of the pool.
That is correct.
That is correct. Okay. All right. And then last thing, it's a compliment. You have crammed more information on a single sheet of drawing than I have seen in a very long time. And it was fascinating to read everything and the care with which this was put together. So I
You're
have
very,
no further comment.
you're very kind to note that. I will pass that on to Yusuf, who is our engineer, and we will we'll look forward to hopefully be before you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Ms. Wan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, my question has been asked and answered. I have no further comments.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wan. Mr. Kalinsky?
I'm fine with the application as proposed. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Murray? Oh, you're muted, Ms. Murray.
Sorry, I was trying to get it up on my screen. I'm confused by what I'm reading to be the stone wall continuing out to the street. And there's a reference to I'm going away from you guys. A stone entry feature?
Let's see. Relative to anything proposed, this is only around any the sitting walls would be around the pool deck, and there would be no stone proposed walls to the street.
Okay, then I must be misinterpreting SF.
Yeah, Denise, are you asking about the temporary vehicular access that comes in from the south, where they're going to have to put stones down and temporary culvert?
I'm asking about the line that's labeled SF. That looks like it's part of the line that continues from the quarter moon up to the street.
Oh, thank you, both of you. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. No, you are right, sir. So let me, which is where you were at. This is a temporary construction entrance that will come from Hesek and go to the site for work. And the SF is silt fence. You might be familiar with it, but if not, you might see it often. It's a black that will encompass a fabric standing roughly 2.5 feet tall that will encompass a construction entrance to impede runoff stormwater siltation. And so the construction entrance off of Hesek and the silt fence is just encircling from Hesek up to and around the proposed pool deck and the minor sitting walls, and then returning back to Hesek.
Now I understand. I did see the silt fence on the plan, but misinterpreted SF. Thank you.
No, a good question, and thank you for bringing, because that kind of brings the project from the street up to the work itself.
All right.
Also, thank you very much for such a thoughtful presentation and going through our guidelines including our guidelines in your presentation.
Thank you for that. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Ms. Orr.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Am I on? I'm on. Okay.
You're live.
I see where the pool equipment is going to be. You think the fence, or are you going to have any kind of like growies to make sure we don't see all that?
A good question. The pool equipment is typically around 2 feet in height. It could be 2 feet 4 inches, and so it would sit behind and under the fence, so you would not see the pool equipment.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm good.
All right, Mr. Plumpy.
Yeah, very good presentation, sir. It was excellent, very educational, and all looks good. Had a real quick question. You'll be submitting to the county for a grading permit for how much land disturbance are you doing? More than 2,500 square feet?
Yes, you are absolutely correct. We are over 2,500. We are under 5,000, which would classify this as a minor construction, but you're correct. We are submitting as part of this process. Yep.
Yeah, set of emergency control plans and so forth.
That is correct.
Okay, got it. And then for construction, how are you accessing the site? I see the construction. I see it. I already see it. So you're coming up beside the I guess I see it on the lower part of the screen. So that should
correct.
All right, should be no problem. I guess the thing I'd make certain, since it's it's a messy construction sometimes with the mud and so forth, that you could have a mud rack hose down the tire so the neighborhood doesn't complain. That's all. Just for your edification. I'm just
Yeah. No. Thank you for that. In fact, we've called it out in a area on the right hand side that the contractor will provide water.
Perfect.
At the location to be cleaned down. That's about 25 feet where we're showing it.
Yeah. Okay.
Prior to even reaching Hesek
That's
Court.
good. No problem. Good luck and look for a pool party for us.
Noted. I will pass it on to the family.
Done.
All right, Mr. Zellman.
I appreciate the presentation, and I'm good with it, and I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All the other members have already stated everything I might say. I have to agree very much with Ms. Murray. Thank you for highlighting the different points of our guidelines that you're satisfying. That's always appreciated in any presentation. With that in mind, Denise or Laura, unless some other member of the public has joined and raised their hand, I would entertain a motion on this application. Member would make one.
I'd be glad to make a motion on this.
All right, Mr. Kolinsky.
Mr. Chairman, move that the ARB recommend approval of action item ARB 21 CRM 01 located at 1098 Mill Run Court, tax map 0191130038 in the Colvin Mill Historic Overlay District, for the proposed construction of a new pool as submitted and presented at the October 14, 2021 ARB meeting. Upon review of the materials, the proposal is found to meet requirements of zoning ordinance section 3101 historic overlay districts.
All right, thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Burns. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. And any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Blackwell, and Denise will be in touch with you in the near future.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
You as well. Thanks. All right, that ends our items for action. Takes us on to our workshop session, which for this one, item number 3 is ARB 21-WEL02, Wellington at River Farm Design Guidelines Review. This is presented by the wonderful Laura Arsenault, representing the County Planning Division. Hello, Laura.
Can't get rid of me. It's all around.
Wouldn't want to if we tried.
Hi, everybody. Oh, good. Thank you. Denise is going to ask. I have a very, very short PowerPoint that I wanted to share with you to give some updates. Can you see my notes or the PowerPoint screen?
Neither.
I would just see you.
Oh, okay. That's not what I wanted.
There we go. We're starting to see some content. Yeah, we see the presentation, no notes.
Oh, great. Okay. So the point of tonight, you all have seen the Wellington at River Farm design guidelines. I haven't seen them for a couple months though. And I just want to give a quick overview. We also have Sarah Vonish and team from Traceries here tonight. They'll be speaking after me about the overall countywide design guidelines and individual design guidelines for each HOD later. But they're also here to help answer questions about this if we need them to. So just a quick overview. You all know the location. The good news, I think it was last Monday, is that Wellington at River Farm came off the market. So it is now not for sale anymore. I think from what I heard from the Washington Post, that 5 members of the board resigned and the last 5 remaining decided to take it off the market. So that is great news, and they'll be moving forward to keep it not status quo, but to keep it as their headquarters for the American Horticulture Society. I haven't heard anything other than that, but that's really great news after a year of being very nervous that it would be bought and subdivided. So we still have a new HOD. The HOD still applies, and that was approved in April by the Board of Supervisors. It took a couple months for us to get an amendment through, and that happened on September 14th. And what that amendment did was basically right before it was approved in April, there was a state law passed that only really applied to this property that allowed the Architectural Review Board to have approval over site plans. Right now, as it currently stands, the ARB only has review authority over site plans. So that gave the ARB a little extra power in case a subdivision did come in for this property. And the other part of that was to allow a provision in the zoning ordinance to consider public access for the property. So those are the two main changes, and those were adopted in September. So tonight, to kind of start wrapping up that historic overlay district process, presenting the design guidelines, you all have gotten them in anticipation of tonight. So tonight we'll be giving you overview and then looking for action on this item next month on the 10th. So as you can see here, there was just some very minor changes from the design guidelines. I'm not going to go through each page, but basically Traceries went through and we updated the design guidelines to reflect the amendment that went through, and also updated the zoning ordinance language because a new zoning ordinance was adopted in July. And those are the main changes that came with this version of the design guidelines. Oh, here we go. So like I said, the updates. And then if there's questions for me or for Traceries, we're both here to chat. But like I said, the next step is really for action at the November 10th meeting for adoption of these design guidelines.
All right, well, I think we'll just, unless you've got anything more, Laura, I think we'll do our standard practice of we'll just go around to everybody. Ms. Aubrey?
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. I noticed in the PowerPoint that was provided ahead of time, there was an additional slide or two that had 7 different steps on things still to be done. And one of them, number 7, happened to be about asking for finding funding sources for 2 studies. One is a cultural landscape study, and the other was for a phase 1 archaeological survey. So my question, or maybe this is just to bring up and to have it percolate in the recesses of our minds. Since the state has passed and enacted a law that says that they were going to make $2 million available next year for helping to acquire and also conserve the Wellington River Farm, that I'm wondering whether or not that $2 million could be repurposed instead of acquiring, because it looks like we don't need to go through the acquiring stage, but to help conserve. I mean, we've already identified the need for a cultural landscape survey and for a phase 1 archaeological survey, that $2 million would go a long way in helping to conduct those 2 studies. So I would just throw that out there as a potential funding source.
Thank you, Michelle. Duly noted, understood. And I will reach out, I think, to Supervisor Stork on that question. But yes, I will follow up. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, regarding the guidelines, I have no further comments on it. I will heartily endorse and thank Michelle for her excellent suggestion. is how to accomplish the next important steps, which is to come up with the cultural landscape survey and the archaeological investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Never alphabetically remember who's next on this list because it's always me. That's why. Ms. Swan.
Yes, no comment, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Kalinsky.
Yeah, no, I'm enthused by the whole thing, but I don't, and I support Michelle's take on the money. The money would be best spent in preserving what's there. So I'm happy. No other comments.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Murray.
I am content.
Ms. Orr.
I'm good. Yeah.
Mr. Blumpy.
No comments. I'm good too. Thank you.
Mr. Zellman.
I'm good. Thanks.
I agree, Laura. We're really appreciative of you and the efforts of all the staff, as well as Trace Theories in doing this. I'm also happy to hear the sign that it is off the market. Maybe that means there can be renewed discussions with the landowner about, opportunities here. And Michelle is very prescient in her suggestion that hopefully we can bring that forward for additional monies and funding. Because I know that's usually the big ask once we find something, how do we take care of it? I have no other substantial comments. I guess if you'll talk us through the next steps, hearing that we seem to be happy, and what should we be expecting? Obviously, you'll be back next meeting for an action from us. And then where do we go from there?
Yeah, so as far as I understand, the next meeting, it's just a reminder, Denise is going to tell you it's on a Wednesday because of Veterans Day holiday next month. So it's actually the 10th, not the 11th. But we'll take it for action, and there's no further event after that. The ARB has discretion over approval of the design guidelines, and then we will move to make any minor changes and upload them to the website. So I'm looking forward to working with the Horticultural Society, on those changes moving forward.
Excellent. Look forward to seeing you again next month. And thank you for the reminder about the meeting and that conflict. I think that's an important thing for all of us to be cognizant of. All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions for Laura, we'll move right on to our presentations.
Thank you, everyone.
Right. Well, that takes us out of workshops and into presentations, and we're sticking with a similar theme, though. We now are going to have Sarah Vanish is going to representing Traceries is going to provide us a general overview and status update on the entire guidelines rewrite.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's good to see you all again. I have a short presentation.
Sarah, do you happen to have headphones? I don't know.
Oh, can you not hear me well?
It's very crackly.
Let me try to call in. Give me just a minute.
Sorry.
No worries. I'm sorry.
While we wait on that, everyone gets a chance to get your glasses of water, and we'll reconvene just a few moments.
Do you need the number? I'll put it in the chat.
Is this better? Can you hear me?
Yes, better. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. All right, so let me pull my slides up again. Okay, So I'm here tonight to provide an update on where we are in the project and our next steps. I'll also walk through some of the background just as a reminder for everyone on this project. As a reminder, the goal of this project was to prepare heavily illustrated and user-friendly design guidelines to assist the ARB applicants and staff in the review of applications and the preservation of the HODs. So we have been tasked with developing new overarching design guidelines that apply to all HODs, updating and illustrating the existing 13 HODs, and then along the way also preparing design guidelines for Wellington at River Farm and potential Holland Hills and Holmes Run Acres HODs. And this was our methodology going through with this project. We started with a kickoff meeting with you and staff before performing site visits and researching all of the HODs. We developed outlines and templates, which you've seen, and then draft overarching design guidelines and district-specific design guidelines. And throughout the process, we've come to you and presented. So the next step really is presenting to the public and then finalizing the design guidelines, incorporating any additional input that we receive. And here you get an idea of the project timeline, which was stalled a bit because of COVID and the addition of the other potential HODs, bringing us to where we are today. And you have received drafts of all of the design guidelines and have reviewed both the general overall as well as all the district specific. And as you've reviewed them and provided us with your comments, we've compiled the comments and edits in a comment matrix, and we've been incorporating those as we go. And we'll continue working with staff to address comments that we couldn't address on our own and need staff input. So a lot of the edits were just HOD specific edits and you know, your recent history and knowledge on some of the HODs, making sure the most up-to-date information in the documents. We revised all the zoning references and went back to old documents to ensure consistency between all of them. We added lighting guidance per a discussion we had last year or earlier this year, I think. And then we've corrected photos and changed images, including removal of not recommended images per input that we've received from the Holland Hills and Holmes Run Acres work groups. So next steps, as I mentioned, continuing to revise before we present and share the design guidelines with the public, revising and finalizing, and then submitting the final design guidelines to the ARB for your ultimate approval. So that's all I had. Happy to take any questions. I have 2 items based on some of the comments that I received for discussion, but if you want to bring up any questions first, or else I can just go straight into them.
Sure. Let's see if any members have any comments or general questions to bring up before we go right to the discussion. So, Ms. Aubrey.
As far as the public, presenting the information to the public, has it been decided yet? Will there be like one gigantic meeting, or will each historic overlay district have its own meeting, or each magisterial district will have one meeting for all the HODs in it? I mean, how is that going to be handled?
Well, I believe we'll be having more than one, but Laura, yeah, you can.
Yeah, I was going to
go
jump in. Thanks. Well, we're all here tonight. We're still working kind of on the methodology of that. It's changed a little bit since COVID. We were going to have a couple community meetings in different parts of the county. I still think we'll have a couple of meetings, but we might boil it down to 2 virtual meetings, depending on where we go. We're looking to do that probably in the spring of next year. and we'd like to couple it with a mailing out to all the homeowners within HODs as we do every couple of years. So we wanted to kind of have those dates set before we did the mailing so that we could notify them as well as notify them they live in an HOD as well as notify them about this design guidelines change. But we are hoping that as soon as we get more staff help, which is interviews this week, that we can kind of make some more progress on this. But tonight, the goal is, as Sarah said, to kind of get the general feedback. And once we get the ARB's kind of general buy-in, that will be the next step, is having those public outreach meetings.
Well, that sounds great, and I really appreciate your mentioning that some information would be sent to every homeowner, because I think it's important. I mean, many homeowners probably don't necessarily read the local news or newspaper, and it would be hard to figure out what newspapers to even put notices in. So to actually just use the U.S. Postal Service sounds great. And it gives them business, the U.S. Postal Service.
Yeah, I'm not sure quite how it's going to look, but we're thinking maybe along the lines of a postcard that we did probably maybe 7 years ago now when Linda was still here, but something similar to that.
Thanks, Michelle. Mr. Burns, any insider wisdom to share?
Yes. One is kind of a follow-up to Michelle's question. There are 2 potential historic overlay districts in the pipeline, the Holland Hills and Holmes Run Acres. And would those have separate public meetings to discuss the implementation of those guidelines if and when those 2 are approved by the Board of Supervisors?
Yes, that's correct. Similar to how tonight we did the Wellington design guidelines. Once the historic overlay districts go through, and if they're approved, then we'll be coming back to the ARB for those specific design guidelines. And those would be public hearings for those.
Okay, and my other comment is to pass on something I learned from someone within Holland Hills, is that they are very pleased with the current revisions to the proposed guidelines for the Holland Hills Historic Overlay District.
Glad to hear it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. Ms. Wan?
No comment.
All right. Mr. Kalinsky?
No comments at this point either. Thanks.
Ms. Murray?
I have nothing to add.
I was hoping to hear your content. Ms. Orr?
Nothing to add.
All right. Mr. Plumpy?
Nothing to add or subtract.
Mr. Zellman?
I couldn't be more content right now.
Oh, wonderful. I have to agree. I'm pleased with all the efforts that Tracy has been putting forward. Looking forward to seeing the responses to all the revisions. Hopefully you got a lot of feedback from the other members. I just know what I provided. And I agree with Michelle's concerns about the public. Given my current involvement in the Reston task force, I have a strong feeling that depending upon what HOD we're talking about, we may have more interest than others. And some of our HODs may have very little feedback and concern from the members that reside there, but I could see some of these places having some input that we might not expect. So the more pragmatic of a plan we have, also based on what we might see based on the first meeting, maybe, we might need to be prepared to have an extra meeting on top of 2 in case we're starting to get an influx. Who knows? Unpredictable there.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for mentioning that. We've already kind of come hot button, but the ones that will have more interest than other historic overlay.
I would also hope we're looking at, like I know in Hunter Mills, there's the weekly newsletter that comes out from Supervisor Alcorn. Hopefully we're going to try to jump on every one of those, and that, any way we can get the folks up. See, you're nodding your head, so I'm sure you already had that figured out, but
Yeah, we haven't started that, but that will be part of the methodology, is reaching out to the supervisors, their staff. I know there's some districts we don't have any historic overlay districts in, but to kind of start spreading that information, we just need to plan the dates, plan the venue, and then go from there.
Well, and I just, since the ARB is frequently frustrated by how other county initiatives seem to ignore us and our existence, I think we need to be a stalwart example of how we want to be inclusive and bring everyone into the conversation that wants to provide their input from a public perspective. We didn't want to ignore anyone. You know, this isn't a road project.
Mr. Chairman, could I add one more comment?
Absolutely, Mr. Burns.
My comment is, and I should have mentioned this up front, this is a monumental accomplishment. Prior to undertaking this revision of all of the design guidelines, we had the oldest, most outdated design guidelines of any jurisdiction in the Washington metropolitan area. And this is to be commended for the county, for funding it, to the Traceries folks, for putting their best professional efforts forward, and I think it will serve us well in the coming decade.
Hear, hear. Agreed. Said like a former chairman, but I should have known to say something that inspirational. Thank you, John. But I believe, Sarah, you said you also had some discussion topics you might want to bring up too.
Well,
so
and thank you for that. Yeah. So, well, first, if any other board members have been waiting to submit comments and have more comments on any of the documents, feel free to keep them coming. But the two items, the first, and I don't know if you will get an answer tonight, but I just wanted to bring them up. So one comment we received was to consider putting the glossary of terms in the overall design guidelines and exclude them from the district-specific design guidelines to shorten the document. I agree, it makes sense. I just wanted to make sure the rest of the board would be fine with that.
So that we don't have to go around the room. If anyone I see, I'm going to try to have the cams up so I can see everyone. Ms. Murray?
I think that these district-specific ones should be pretty much self-contained, and that it would not be a good idea to move the appendix with the terms to some other document because people are unlikely to go read the second document.
I'm actually inclined to agree with Ms. Murray, particularly one because these are digital documents, and while we may print out versions of them, for the most part, people are going to be accessing them online. So we're not really spending more paper here. We're just spending more ones and zeros, and I'd rather have it accessible in every one of them, since that was kind of the intent in my mind when we went through that kind of exercise, was a master set of guidelines, but then each district would be able to function in a way that if someone had a question, they should be able to get many of those answers in those spaces. Any other members? I'm scanning your all's cameras to see if, oh, sorry, there you go, Lisa, or sorry, Miss Aubrey. Go ahead.
Yes, well, I'm the one that actually, I made the suggestion to Traceries for this. And one of the reasons why was that in many of the sets of guidelines, most of the terms in the glossary are not used in the document. So it really looked like it was a way of, let's just include a glossary of every darn word we can think of that has to do with historic preservation and, rehab of historic structures, and stick it in there to maybe we'll educate people by that. And I just found that very irksome, that to me, the glossary should be defining things that are in the set of guidelines. So that would mean you would have to remove a huge number of words. I mean, I actually did searches within each document for the stuff that's in the glossary. And I found that like 90% of the words in the glossary are not in the document. So I felt that it was really going overboard, and that it would be better to just have a link, since it's going to be electronic probably anyway, that to have a link to one document, one glossary that has every darn word you could possibly think of that you feel should be in, there, but not to have it in every single set of guidelines. So I'll take the blame for making the suggestion, and I still stand by the suggestion that I think if you have an individual glossary in each document, that it should only be for words that are used in that document.
So I guess my question, Michelle, then could we split the difference then, like you're saying? Because it really is a matter of Control F finding if the terms are in there. Could each district have a glossary of relevant terms to it and the main document have the overall glossary of all the terms? And that's what I would be thinking. But Michelle, I see your hand up and I see John's hand up. So I'll go to Michelle. Sorry, not Michelle. Sorry, Elise, I'm calling you Michelle. Sorry. Elise, I see your hand up.
Sorry, I'll make my hair look fuller. I think Michelle's thought is good, and I think that perhaps there should, since 90% of it isn't used, I think there could be one common glossary of terms that are used throughout, specifically used in the guidelines, instead of trying to prune it down for each specific one, but make a list of what's used in all the guidelines instead of everything that could possibly be there. And have the everything that could possibly be there in the overall. That makes sense? A common glossary that includes the terms.
What would you do with Mount Air? Mount Air's document is filled with architectural terms, and there is not really one bit of architecture at Mount Air.
What I was suggesting is you wouldn't include the architectural terms, because you said that 90% aren't used. So why don't we have a common glossary of the 10% that are used included in each guideline, but not be specific to exactly what is used in each document, but that would make it shorter. And you could just ignore the architectural guidelines. Besides, nobody reads Mount Air because there's nothing to do there. When did we have our last item that wasn't the Park Authority?
Guess what? One's going to be coming up soon. Don't worry.
Next week. No, I'm just
yeah.
I just should say right now they all have the exact same glossary in there, just developed early on in this process. And one of the tasks going forward for finalizing was to tailor them to the individual district. Because the mid-century neighborhoods are going to have very different terms than some of the older ones. So right now it's really a placeholder, but I do understand what you're saying about having a very short glossary pertaining only to the district in the district-specific documents, and having a larger glossary of architectural terms that might be in the overall design guidelines. I think that's what I'm understanding.
Well, let's. I know John, Mr. Burns, you had your hand up too, so I want to make sure to give you a chance to provide your input as well.
Sure, I'll throw something else entirely out there, and that is, I think Michelle's arguments are very well taken, but looking at the big picture, we fail if people don't refer to both the overall guidelines and the site-specific guidelines. And so I think that there has to be some way of inextricably linking the two, and perhaps the guidelines, the glossary in the overall guidelines is a means of doing that. So if they have any questions about it, they can refer back to those guidelines. But we need to be absolutely certain that people won't look at the site-specific guidelines and ignore the overall guidelines.
All right. So I guess I think what Elise was suggesting is that, and Sarah was saying that the glossaries we're seeing for each of these obviously were intended to be finely tuned. We're at this point, but what I think Elise was suggesting is
I dropped my suggestion since they were already planning to finely tune them. I was just trying to make it less of a task for traceries.
Oh, we're
since
paying tracers, right?
it's already part of Tracery's intentions, then they should make a finely tuned one for each of the 5, each of the 8, whatever, 9 we have now, I guess. And have, as John suggested, some really prominent link to the overall glossary. That's where I am now.
Michelle, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that would be great to have the longest, the most number of terms being in the overall overarching set of guidelines, and that each individual historic overlay district has a very abbreviated set of terms, but being highlighted at the very beginning of the glossary, that for any additional terms for the person to go to the overarching set of guidelines to find more words being defined.
I think that's a really good suggestion, and I think it was a well-taken point, I think, about the various districts we have that may have a variety of unique terms themselves, particularly our more modern HODs and potentially even more modern HODs. And maybe perhaps that's something we think about also making very clear in the main guidelines is, and I would have to go back and review the text, and Sarah, you may be very familiar with it. How clearly are we saying that early on in the main guideline set that these two are meant to be used in a fashion conjointly, or could we emphasize that any more than we can?
Yeah, I have to go back. I mean, it's in the discussion, but maybe we have a little call out box or something with a prominent link to the district specific ones, just to make it a little bit more obvious. But let me go back and look at it to make sure.
Chris, this is Laura. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So in the existing guidelines, although they're from 1992, almost 30 years old, and Sarah, can you give me an estimate of how long the overall design guidelines are? How many pages? Is it too much to combine them together?
It's probably under 50 pages, the overall.
But then that'll be too long for the user, right?
We definitively want to keep them set. We still want a pull-out section of it. Or are you saying put them all in the same document, then one set of glossary terms at the very end of it?
That would be my suggestion, because then you're making sure they're looking at both together, like one PDF, even if it is, I don't know, 100 pages.
And with PDFs now, you can obviously quick link to lots of things, and so.
Right. I mean, just a suggestion that kind of goes down the middle, but and it's also kind of on Denise and myself and staff moving forward to encourage the use of the overall and the specific, right? Because we have overall guidelines. I didn't even know we had them for a long time. So they're just not used. But if we're really trying to include it, I think sometimes that maybe just having them in the same document. But
now that begs a very valuable question of, I mean, we're now talking about the tangible format here of, would we rather just have the whole package all together? And that way they're not separable, because that kind of gets at the problem I think, John, you were bringing up of, if someone just goes for the Lake Ann HOD guidelines, they're not going to look at the main packet anyways. But if they're all together, I'm seeing a thumbs up from Joe here, then we don't have to worry about making multiple glossaries. It's all in the same place. And the way PDFs work now, you can click to the section you want, but you can't say you didn't see it. Looking, all I saw was Elise.
I would make it basically 2 documents in one file and keep the specific glossary for the district. And then have the general guidelines come second, and at the end would be the glossary for everything. I think we want to make package for the specific district as easy for people to follow as possible.
Any other observations? I only see a portion
Can
of
I
your
throw
remaining
my
time.
2 cents in here?
Yes, absolutely, Miss Aubrey.
I think it's a very good point you speakers have raised about the overarching guidelines, because every time I read a set of the draft for each specific historic overlay district, while I know there's an overarching set of guidelines that exists somewhere, it's really not evident or emphasized in the individual historic overlay district guidelines. So it might actually be advantageous to have one document that starts with chapter 1 is the overarching guidelines, and then you have the next 13 chapters be each of the individual historic overlay district guidelines. And then you have a glossary at the end that applies to everything. And you have, but maybe each chapter that has, for each historic overlay district individually, would have its own bibliography, so that all the citations that go with all the documents that are being cited for that particular district are tied together with it.
I think that makes sense, and I agree, because like if I'm, let's say I'm a developer trying to go in here to develop a piece of land, and I don't want to go to something that's unorganized. I think what Miss Audrey said is perfect, because I just want to know, give me the overall arching thing, and I'm going to my chapter. I'm going to read the bibliography, what I got to do, and be on my way. And so be it. And if in the PDF format, you can always print out what pages you want, not to print out the whole thing. You print out your own chapter, and that's what they're going to use. I'd keep it as simple as possible. One document is, I think, the best way, in my opinion.
I think from a materials combination perspective, that's not actually a very hard ask for things we put together in the digital format. I think the big thing I think Sarah may be looking for is, are we talking about an appendice at the end of every one of the HOD sections that gives specific terms to that HOD? For example, Mount Ayr or Lake Anne or Holland Hills that might have their own. Or are we talking main guidelines, a chapter or a section for each of the HODs, and then at the very end of the whole thing, here's your glossary for every term you need? I do like Michelle's point about bibliography being chapter specific, because it does get a little crazy if you want to find a citation, if you're going to have to go dig to the back for pictures and credits. But I think from my mind, a glossary at the end to rule them all just kind of makes it easier. But I'm looking to see if there are any head nods, shakes.
Let me ask you something real quick here. Sarah, how many pages do you think each chapter would have its own appendix if you did have a glossary of terms after each chapter? I'm not for that. I'm just asking the general question. Is it one page, one extra page in there, or is it 5 for each chapter, which is laborious?
No, I mean, for the architectural terms, it would probably be just 1 page for each individual district.
Yeah. To me, honest to God, again, I said, I want something that's very user-friendly. I just like to see that right away. So I'm trying to go to the total appendix. So if there's 1 extra page for each chapter, I don't think it's a big hindrance. But that's all I'll say. I'll be quiet from now on this. Thanks.
Well, Sarah, have we given you something to work with, or have we made you leave more confused potentially? Because it sounds like one of the big things I'm taking away is we want this document to not be separated in a way that people won't pay attention to the main guidelines. That's one of the biggest takeaways. We also don't want duplicity in the sense of, constant repeating of terms that may have no relevance for a particular section. That's what I'm getting from everybody, is we'll want to not waste, not want not. But I also don't want us to have perfection be the enemy of the good here, and let you all kind of digest that if you need time to digest that too.
I think I'm clear on the glossary. I think also we can make some efforts to call out the overall design guidelines or the district specific so that it's really clear to users that they need to go reference this other document. Maybe it's a single page at the beginning of each district specific document that says, also go to this link to reference the overall guidelines. I think if you combine them all, it's going to be a really big document that people aren't going to be to download easily or open easily. So you might want to think about keeping them separate, but we don't have to worry about that at this time. But I will go back to make sure we clearly call it out.
Forward is how unwieldy that would be. That's a good thing to think about. And I think a joke for some of the more senior members on our board who've been around longer, maybe just need a picture of Richard Beers and Robert Motley shaking their heads, and just put that at the front of every set of individual district guidelines and wagging their fingers, and then people will know you better go back to the other ones. But
step two.
Yes, Mr. Plumpy.
Sure. Sarah, let me ask you something real quick. How large are these files? Like if you did the whole book together, is it 50 megabytes or what? 1 terabyte? Or what is it? Is it?
No. Well, it depends on the quality of the images that we
that's what
export.
What,
it can be. It can depend, and I can't open it right now just because I'm sharing my screen and.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have a high res and a low res. I mean, low res is a printing perhaps because your printer won't get bogged down, but the high res is what you see on the screen, or whatever. I'll let that to your expertise, but I mean that's a good point. And then Mr. Daniels, you would kind of bring that up about size of documents. I was not so much about pages, but about how much will it mess up someone's older computer as opposed to the newer ones.
Joe, just looking at the ones we most recently looked at, they range from about 15 megabytes to I think one of them was up to 50.
Each of them, each individually?
Yeah, each one could range from roughly about 15 to 50 megs. So
okay, now Sarah, can you make them lower resolution? Can I cut that in half or by 70%? I know it's possible. That's one thing I would do.
I can work on the compression. We submitted some in low res, and the images I don't think were coming out clearly enough. So we need to kind of tune that at the end to figure out the good middle.
Well, that's your answer there. If you have one document that's over 300 megabytes because of all that, you're just going to take forever to load up on someone's computer. Just thinking those terms. Sorry.
Right. Oh, well, Michelle, there you go. Sorry, we couldn't hear you for a second.
The other thing is, if you're consolidating all these glossaries and having either just one, if you're only going to have one page of glossary terms for each of the historic overlay districts, you're right there, you're eliminating 5 pages times 13 just for that. And you're probably going to eliminate a lot of the high resolution photos and pages that just are colored with the number chapter 2 on it that nobody's going to print out anyway because that's an ink hog. I mean, that's the other thing. I personally am. I hate companies and websites that have web pages where you want to print it out because you want the information that's written on the page, but they have so many darn colors and wonderful, beautiful drawings and photos, but it's an ink hog. So maybe think about that too, and that might lower your resolution.
Michelle, that's an excellent point because like I'm with you, because sometimes your whole page is like a background of green with one number on it. That's a lot of ink, but long and short of it is, it just takes longer to print. So I guess graphically you have to go back. Is it better to do some things in black and white only, or less photographs? Just thinking out loud.
I'm going to be a stalwart defender of higher quality imagery and stuff because the old guidelines felt like they were typed by Linda Blank. So Linda actually had to sit in front of a typewriter and type them. That's how old they are.
I know.
We had a secretary back then. It wasn't typed by Linda Blank.
I know,
There,
I know.
yeah.
I was just picking on Linda. She's not here to defend
It's
herself.
before, it was before Linda, and when
It
we
was.
rewrote them, we had to retype them up because we couldn't scan them.
You couldn't scan them. Yeah.
Well, carbon paper was our friend. Just
Mr.
kidding.
Chairman, if I could add
Yes,
another
Mr.
observation.
Burns.
Word processor 93.
Go ahead, Mr. Burns.
The Library of Congress acknowledges the fact that not everybody has a fast internet connection or a powerful computer, and they offer their graphic intensive media in different resolutions, and you can pick which resolution you want to download and print. So that would address the issue of huge file sizes. You might, for instance, choose to download in high res the chapter for the HOD that you're interested in, but in lower res for the overall guidelines because they're of less interest to you. But if you have that opportunity to mix and match resolutions, then you give the end user, an opportunity to choose what best fills their need.
Very well taken. And I think the county has some accessibility requirements for its websites and documents anyways that I think might already be things that Sarah has to work with Laura about anyways when we get the final product from them. But hopefully, Sarah, we've given you enough input on glossaries and how we might like things presented in a way that is workable for you. Do you have another discussion item for us?
I have one more, and this is in the Colvin Run Mill Historic Overlay District, and it's a general store. It doesn't have a classification currently. It was built in the 1890s as a general store and post office for the area, and it was moved onto the property by the County Park Authority in the 1970s. So it wasn't identified as historic in the original Historic Overlay District designation report, and then it wasn't identified in the 1991 memo on contributing properties either. So, you know, we talk about the general store throughout the guidelines, but we have sections on the historic and contributing properties, and we don't have a classification for this one.
This one just fell off the list and isn't in either one. So Laura, so if we made a decision on this, wouldn't this require like an action by us to do that? Because that would be changing an HOD, wouldn't it, to recognize a property?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the example. Was it St. Mary's a couple years ago? We removed 2 properties from contributing. So I think we would just have to make and we can do that next month, of course, or whatnot. But make a motion, or I mean, you can do it tonight too. But to make a motion, just to add it. My only concern is, well, no, that wouldn't even be a concern because I was going to say we'd have to make sure the board approved it, but the board didn't approve. I don't know if the board approved the memo in the 90s either. So I'm not sure with the older ones if we'd have to go back to the board of supervisors to say which one is contributing and non-contributing.
Is the general store on the Fairfax County inventory? Does it at least have that protection?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, John. Is it a heritage resource?
Yeah.
Let me check.
I mean, it's part of the district, but I can't open it up right now to double check.
Elise is looking for us.
What's its formal name?
It was called the general store, but there was also, I think, a Fitzgerald reference. Here, let me stop sharing my screen.
My file is alphabetical by name. Let's go down.
I mean, we can put together like a little, Denise and I can work on a little memorandum or something like that and to have it formalized, if that makes sense, and then we can vote on it at the next.
I think we would have to do something official to make a decision on it. And obviously, I agree with John's question about, what is it on the inventory at a minimum? Because if it's on the inventory, I think it's much easier for us to make the justification of, well, let's formally recognize it as contributing to the the HOD. But if it's in a twilight zone, then it's really, I think there's a whole bunch of other steps that have to be taken to address that.
Sarah, do you happen to have the address of that property handy? You can look it up on our map too. If not, it's okay. We can always, if not,
100, no, it's okay. I'm on Google. 10017 Colvin Run Road, Great Falls.
Well, while I'm looking that up, if you want to talk about something else, we can do that.
That was the end of my items.
Well, I would assume that could be something we could include in an action for the guidelines or as part of an action at a meeting if we feel like it falls within our purview to do. But Laura and Denise, you might want to touch base to make sure it seems like if we can remove properties, we should be able to add them.
Yeah, that's the precedent I'm going off of, was the St. Mary's example where the ones we kind of took them off that 1991 memorandum list because they were just kind of put in there because they were over 50 years old at the time or something like that, but they didn't have any. And then those properties were demolished. So that's the example that comes to mind most.
Is the general store noted in the National Register form for Colvin Run? And is it listed as contributing there?
And that's another point for why we probably need to do the research and background on it so that we can at least put it somewhere together, make the motion, and then Sarah can include it in the final copy of the design guidelines.
Yeah, I think the documentation might have been done before it was moved onto the property, but we'll come back to it.
Okay. Well, so it sounds like what I'm seeing from just a general look at the members is we'd be amenable to adding it, but we want to make sure we have a clear, all the questions answered about, where does it exist in the inventory? Where does it exist in relation to the existing nomination? And, it sounds like, Laura, there's an approach you and Denise could take with a memorandum that we could approve along with other steps to resolve that.
I just real quickly brought up the map. It is listed on the inventory, but it's on the Colvin Run Mill property. Like the property parcels all on the inventory. So I don't know if that helps with the contributing or non-contributing to historic overlay district. So it might be a deeper question than that. So we'll do some research and get back on it.
Yeah, and considering I think the nomination for the property was from 77, I don't believe it's going to be on there. All right. Well, Sarah, do you have anything else for us? Or okay. Well, again, I agree with John. Thank you so much for all the efforts you've done, all the other members who have appreciated that. And this is a significant achievement we're approaching towards. Second grade me would not have realized I would be presiding over the approval of a new set of guidelines. So he would have not known what to say.
Well, thank you all. And I'll be back soon.
All right.
Great job. Great job.
Now that I've truly dated myself, let's move on to board and staff items. All right, first item on that agenda. Denise, unless you want to walk through them, I'm happy to read through them as I've started co-opting in my time, is the review and action and approval of previous month's minutes for September 2021. Do we have any additional comments or revisions that have been provided? And Denise, did you get anything from members?
Mr. Chairman, with respect to the first page of them, excused absences, is that accurate? The reason I'm asking is in the context of the proposed changes to our bylaws that would begin to segregate excused and unexcused absences. It means keeping track of people's participation.
I was not certain if our bylaws are accepted yet because they have to. Does the acceptance?
I'm thinking down the pipe.
Oh, in general, okay.
In general, should we begin to segregate excused absences from unexcused absences, i.e., absences where we've not heard from someone?
I would agree. I think we do need to start identifying that in these documents. I am trying to pull the minutes up so that I have them in front of me. Unable to do so rapidly, but I did not. I'm trying to remember who contacted me about absences prior to this. Denise, are you there?
I'm suggesting that we go back and change these minutes, but for future minutes, we should adopt that.
Yes, I would agree wholeheartedly with that approach. And
Yes, I was calling them up. I'm sorry, Chris. I was trying to.
Oh, it's okay. Thanks, Denise. I think then if that's going to be the case, we're going to start marking that. Then we definitely need to, Denise and I, or Jason, in the case if it's going to be me, need to coordinate with you, Denise, about whether or not an absence was one that was excused. And that marries into our next topic that we can talk about regarding, because I think we have at least one member who I don't think is on the board anymore, but is showing up. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So I think that's noted for future minutes. For now, let's just mark them as absences, I think, since we have not yet officially started doing excused. Does that seem agreeable?
So would you like that changed?
Yes, for these current minutes, I think we should just be marking that we had, I believe, 2 members absent.
Members absent.
And in the future, we can change that to excused and unexcused.
Are you making a motion?
I will not. I'll look for a member to make a motion, since I shouldn't be making this said motion.
Actually, before you make the motion, are you saying that this is like, does the clock start over every January? Is that how it works? For the
Well, the new bylaws aren't yet approved, Joe, so we don't yet have that whole policy.
Okay, so sorry.
We don't want to start saying excused in them. I think that's what John was pointing out. We just want to say absent at this moment.
Sorry.
Ms. Murray.
I move that the Architectural Review Board change its policy in its minutes to list absent members as excused or unexcused, starting with the November meeting.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second, Mr. Kalinsky, meet Mr. Burns in that. We have a motion that's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that policy for our minutes has been updated. All right. With that in mind, do we have a proposal to approve last month's minutes, though, and pay the recording secretary?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we adopt the September 2021 ARB meeting minutes and approve payment to the recording secretary.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Murray. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. All right. On to Treasurer's Report. There's Denise.
There she is. Okay, so my understanding is that you all maybe have not received a treasurer's report due to meetings not being held and changing of staff, etc. So there were 3, reports provided, which I've just summarized. The August beginning balance of August 1st was $27,245.07. There were total miscellaneous adjustments through the month of August totaling $4.05, giving us a beginning balance in September of $27,249.12. In September, the clerk was paid for a total of $541.89 subtracted from your account, leaving a balance on October 1st of $26,698.23.
Thank you, Denise. Any questions from any of the members? Seeing none, appreciate you provide. Oh, Mr. Burns, I saw your hand. There we go.
Yes. In the June 2021 ARB budget that you put on to us, it's the gross pay accrual for the recording secretary, but there's also Medicare, FICA, and the like. And so what is the total we're actually expense that we're incurring for the, I just want to get the total.
Sure, that's actually the number that I provided. And let me get back to it.
John, what they are is, in June, there's end of year corrections, adjustments for like FICA that might be earned between the end of that recording period and the next.
Okay, so those are end of year adjustments to make everything appropriate, right?
And then they usually just cancel out the next month.
Okay, okay.
Right.
If that's the simple explanation, I accept that. Thank you.
All right. Moving on to administrative items, going back to in-person meetings, hard copy versus digital submissions and distributions. Lay it on us, Denise.
Yeah, so I just wanted to revisit this, this idea of not having hard copies provided to some members and having hard copies provided to some members. And I did, because I wasn't there for the initial conversation, I just wanted to, again, revisit this with you all to make sure if everybody had strong feelings about which way they were going. I think just administratively, it would be much easier just to go one way or the other. But like I said, I'm bringing this back to you all. I realized that there was some kind of survey taken, and I do have those results, but I wanted to open this up again.
So Denise, just to be certain before everyone answers, you're asking when we go back to in-person, what are the preferences that folks would have? And I know, Elise, you've got your hand up, so I was going to go right to you.
I very firmly need to have hard copy because I can't see it on my screen. So I just can't work very well with the electronic only. Has been my take all along.
All right. Mr. Burns.
Yeah, I would agree with Elise that if we go back to meeting in person and we attempt to do that in a digital format, is the county going to provide us large monitors to plug our laptops into so we can see these things at a reasonable resolution? That was a question I asked a while ago that I was never really answered. But if you go digital, you have to invest in the technology so everybody's on a level playing field.
Thank you, John. And that was the point. Yes, you brought that up last time, and I don't think we ever got an answer on that. Any other members have a particular opinion? Ms. Aubrey.
Well, I don't have a laptop that I would be bringing to an in-person meeting. So I would only be looking at material in my home and then coming to the meeting with nothing in hand if I didn't have the paper version. I will admit I'm kind of averse to getting the paper version because I can read the digital one and I can blow it up usually to a level that I can see. If I can't see it, I can ask a question. But my main concern is not really the paper versus the digital. My concern is getting it 2 weeks ahead of time, because my understanding is our bylaws say we're supposed to be getting this stuff 2 weeks ahead. And things have really kind of sloughed off over the last 2 years, and we're getting them a week ahead maybe, or maybe even less. And that's digital. So, and sometimes it's a lot of paper to look at. Sometimes it's not very many, but you never know. So I would go paper. If I had to vote, I would go paper, and I want it delivered to my house 2 weeks ahead.
Mr. Zellman.
Yeah, I think we've talked in the past about giving folks the option. If people feel they need a paper copy, I think, we should absolutely do that. And if people are comfortable just receiving a digital copy, I think we should do that as well. I'm largely comfortable with receiving a digital copy, and agree with Michelle. If there was something I couldn't read, I could certainly ask a question about it. But certainly wouldn't be opposed to any technology that would be available to us to assist us in viewing things. And I think we should just kind of, as we get back to the in-person meeting, give folks the option about what they're most comfortable with. Although I do agree also with Michelle, and I'm sure everybody does, that making sure we have enough time to review everything is important.
Unless there's another member that has a comment to share, I would agree with everything that's been said, that this was probably something that came out of the fact that we were going to have staff reports. And that was something that I think there was going to be a lot of overhaul in how things were communicated to us. Ideally, the staff was going to be mailing things to us, so we would have one consistent package, or at least one way of coming to us, so that we didn't have, developers or applicants mailing things or at the last minute. And so I agree with Michelle. I think this is all kind of, we've been trying to make do with the circumstances we're in, but I think the submissions have been getting later and later digitally, which that should be the last thing we should have a problem with, because it's digital, so we shouldn't have to be worried about mailing. But it sounds like if right now, if we're going to go back, it sounds like the preference is that we would prefer to have hard copies. And I mean, I guess the question is, if there is a member that wants to request only digital, is that something you can accommodate, Denise? I mean, I love digital. Some of these things that folks send to us are really hard to open. Even the pool project that came in was a beast of a PDF, depending on how you open it. So in a printed version, it isn't going to try to crawl up my computer and take it over. It's just going to, obey. So it sounds like if we're doing in person, I'm getting the impression that folks might want to just have hard copies sent to us. But the priority is prior to with plenty of advance notice.
Chris, speaking of sizes of documents, again, like we talked about the design guideline, should there not be a size limit that they could send it to, so that it doesn't bog down our computers if we had them digitally? Just a thought.
I mean, ideally you'd want that, but I think we didn't even think about that because we didn't plan on COVID at that point. We were planning on hard copies going to staff, and staff putting together staff reports and sending us to us, and now we kind of pivoted as fast as we could.
Right. Yeah. No worries.
Any other thoughts from members? Or Denise, did we give you something to work with there? Because your comment says going back to in-person. When are we going back to in-person? Okay, we don't know.
Do not know. I do not know. I mean, I think we're headed that way. I don't think it's going to be too much longer. I know that we as staff are back into the office. We're on a different schedule now, and that we're allowed to telework as a policy, remote work, a lot more liberally than we had been. But I think that was just a function of a result of COVID rather than a reason, that we're now going, I think this remote policy is going to be in place going forward, even when, everybody goes back. But the board is meeting in person, the planning commission is meeting in person. I know that I'm involved with the Confederate Names Task Force, and I know that they're meeting in person. So I think that there are a lot of movement. There's a lot of movement to get people back to meeting in person. So I see the writing on the wall. I just want to be prepared as the new administrator, and wanted to hear that conversation for myself, and what the thinking was behind everybody's reasoning for either digital or hard copy. I'll just say that I think it would be difficult to do both. I think if somebody really felt strongly that they had to have a digital copy, then we could probably provide it, because they have to submit a hard copy to us, and we could scan it and get it to people. And perhaps when we start doing the staff reports, that's when we start really looking at that digital distribution. But it would be much easier for me to hand the applicant a list of names and addresses and say, this is your due date. You need to get a copy to everybody, a hard copy to everybody by that date.
So, Denise, I'm just gonna interrogate that question a little bit more then.
Yes,
So
please.
we
Yeah.
now are providing a lot more admin items to us that I think we greatly appreciate getting. Otherwise, unless you're mailing those to us as well, I would assume the only way you could provide some of the admin items like the zoning updates and any other things like that, that would have to be shared digitally, which I believe they were being shared digitally, like even prior meeting minutes were being shared in a digital format. So it doesn't
Sure.
seem like this SharePoint site we would be using would be going away. I also wonder why we couldn't, in that list you gave to someone, say, particularly for some of our larger developers, Mr. Zellman prefers a digital submission, and but I don't want to needlessly burden folks with paper, but I am more sympathetic to the folks that definitely need hard copies if we're not going to go back into an environment where we don't have our luxury of technology here. So, any other members have any observations they want to share?
Well, Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, I mean, I'm not opposed to receiving a hard copy. It's fine. I'll receive one and I'll look at it. But to the extent we can save some trees, I'm all for it, because I'm comfortable personally with the digital copy. But if we feel we only have to do it one way, I'm certainly not going to object to getting a hard copy. That's fine.
I was just picking on you, Jason, since
It's
you
okay.
mentioned.
No. I didn't feel. I just wanted, because I was the one who kind of, said we could do it both ways. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Chris, can I make a comment? Sorry, this is Laura.
Sure, Laura.
So a couple of things. We usually ask the applicant to send us an electronic copy anyway for our records and stuff, as we're kind of approving our plans now all digitally and trying to make a digital record. So we can ask for both, and we had been kind of doing that before COVID, is providing a digital copy kind of for your reference as it came available. So we can certainly do that. I think Denise's question too, as we've talked about it for the two of us, is just if we could send out a hard copy, to everybody or nobody, because then it diminishes the list. Or I think I like the idea that somebody said, prefer we could have a Excel spreadsheet with address, hard copy, digital copy, or something like that, and have to put the distribution on the applicant, just so that's one less thing we have to do.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And I was under the understanding that you all weren't yet ready to start mailing us stuff, and that we would be putting that back on the applicant if we went back to hard copy.
Oh, no, there's no doubt. We would not be doing the mailing to you. We would have we're so close on the staff report. We just need to get over the hump of getting there and have a little less things to work on right now. So as soon as that happens, I think it's going to change most of the stuff we're talking about now. But until the point, I think it's probably appropriate to revert to kind of what we were doing before with having the applicant mail the copies. But that wasn't really pushed back on that much when I was doing the ARB. So I don't think it was a huge lift for them.
Okay. I think we've talked your ear off there, Denise, on that topic. And since we're not going back to person just yet, I think we've got a little debrief still.
I just wanted to hear that conversation, and I appreciate you all updating me.
Certainly. Let's so I added one item to the agenda in administrative appointments. So let's talk about that. So is Mr. McReynolds still a member of this board? I was understanding that he's not. We know the answer to that.
Yes, I do. No, so I do believe that it was announced at the last meeting that Mr. McReynolds, but maybe that was maybe it was just to me, but Mr. McReynolds did resign.
Okay. Well, that one's, there you go, Michelle. I was under the understanding that he did resign, but he tendered it in a very quick fashion. Now the bigger question is the appointments. As Michelle pointed out, there was recently a new round of appointments of folks. Some members who have not been at our meetings since the pandemic. And I asked Laura to interrogate this with county staff to find out if there was anything more information about this, because that's a little disconcerting to me if someone's not coming to a meeting, why they're being reappointed.
I did bring it up with Leanna, and the question became, well, what she posed back to me was until we adopted the new bylaws, there wasn't much we could do. Usually, the last couple times we've gotten appointments, the supervisor's office has reached out to me, like questioning, like, are these people attending, like that type of thing. But this time I had no clue on that, and the person in question got reappointed, and I didn't even have an opportunity to comment on it. So I'm not sure at this point what we can do, but I did ask Leanna, you know, and she said, well, since the bylaws as we currently stand today don't have any kind of enforcement, we'd have to wait till the bylaws are enacted, which at this point we're looking at December at the Board of Supervisors, and then it would be from that date forward.
Sure. Elise, you have a comment to add?
It was my belief, excuse me, it was my belief that there was a board policy that overreaches the bylaws, that people with too many absences could be reported to the clerk of the board.
The Board of Supervisors or the ARB?
The clerk of the Board of Supervisors, who's the person who keeps track of all of us. Look for that, because I'm pretty sure that's an official county policy. It does not need to be in our bylaws.
From my understanding, it was at the discretion of the board member who appointed that person to the ARB. I mean, I'm happy to check it. Denise and I know who to reach out to, but from my understanding that, once again, supervisor's discretion of whether or not to reappoint somebody. And
well, I think Elise was getting less that reappointment and more about that there was a policy that a board could report to the clerk of the Board of Supervisors a member not attending. Because I understand what you're saying, Laura, that it's at the discretion of that appointing supervisor if they reappoint someone. I was going to bring up, I'm a little frustrated that if I were on a board, I would love for that person to check in with me before reappointing me every time, you know, just as a general touch base. I don't want to be on too many boards I don't know about. But at least you were getting at that there's an existing policy.
I believe that there's a policy, and I'm sure ultimately it is up to the appointing supervisor. However, it has to be brought to the appointing supervisor's attention. I believe there is a route.
Well, Laura or Denise, if that's something you all find and talking to Leanna about, that would be very helpful. My concern was more about the appointments, about even checking in with members, because obviously I know many of you, I think, really enjoy our times together every once a month on a Thursday, but I would not want you to be reappointed without any notification. So that was a little jarring to not find out, you know, for anyone who did get reappointed. I hope you were happy with that. And I'm happy to have you here.
Chris, that is life as an appointee in Fairfax County. Some supervisors are diligent, others just reappoint you. I got reappointed by Kate Hanley when my district turned to a Republican and didn't know it at all. So that's you just go with the flow on that. It's up to your supervisor, how responsible they are or not.
Well, you're a monument unto yourself, Elise. So they would never not reappoint you. Let's not kid around.
But to Elise's point, the specific person was appointed by a previous chairman, and I'm not sure with the new chairman they went back and vetted that. necessarily. So anyway, Denise and I are happy to look into it further. I kind of got stonewalled the last time I tried to ask, but we can ask the BAC clerk and the clerk to the board if there's any overarching bylaw, as Elise mentioned.
And depending if our bylaws are adopted, you're saying starting in December is when. So, and that gets to your question, Joe, about excused versus unexcused and things like that. If that policy gets adopted, I think we would start things at the beginning of the year. Is the way I would look at it.
I think Chris, it's within a 12-month period. Like, I think that it's not like a fiscal year, but like within a 12-month period, but we can check and.
Yeah, I mean, just start it, to me, makes sense at January to December, with August is always off. If I understand.
Our new traditional August always off policy.
You're welcome.
King's Dominion every August. No
The
problem.
King's Dominion law.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
All right. Well,
We'll
thank
follow
you,
up on that.
Laura Denise, for interrogating that a little bit more.
And
obviously,
in the
with Mr.
meantime,
McReynolds-
might we reach out to the reappointed people and welcome them and tell them all about how they can get further engaged?
I mean, absolutely, John. I believe county staff have reached out multiple times to some of those reappointed members on our behalf. I would obviously encourage any of you, if you want to reach out to Ms. Murray.
There is a document prepared by the clerk of the court that's been distributed to the History Commission over the years. That includes the purpose of the Architecture Review Board and its current membership and who appointed them, when their terms are up, and then past membership to somewhere in the 90s. History Commission's getting it regularly. I think the ARB should see it as well. That will answer a lot of your questions, or at least provide you with the information to know what's going on.
Thanks,
Right
Elise.
now.
Well, and then I was also going to bring up with Mr. McReynolds resigning, we do have another vacancy, and we always want to fill those vacancies. I think we all recalled long ago we were barely meeting quorum. So, and Mr. McReynolds was an engineer, I believe. Now I'm trying to remember what district he was appointed from. Not Lee. Sully, that's right. Sully district. So if anyone happens to know an engineer that wants to serve on Architecture Review Board in the Sully district, obviously we always could benefit from that. Or I'm sure Joe would always love to have another landscape architect. We could always.
Yeah, I was going to say his position was related professional, so we can broaden the search.
Definitely, I know many of you are in larger circles, though now our circles have been restricted to digital mostly. But if you know of anyone, please obviously push the recommendations. Always good to have another person in the chair. All right, let's start to move through the discussion and reports. Reston Comprehensive Plan Task Force update. I'll be quick. The task force is humming along after the August recess they went on. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening, including they're planning on how they're going to introduce the updated language to the public. I raised the question just recently about how they plan to share the updated language with all the boards, authorities, and commissions, pointing out that this is something that the ARB has frequently suffered from. We don't always know when these things are happening. How can we make it available and aware to everyone? I've snuck in a lot of fun language about Association Drive and other places and land use sections, encouraging tax credit usage and other such things. And overall, I think it's a lively discussion if you ever want to watch it. It's worth seeing. Beyond that, I don't have much more to update on that unless any member has a question.
Chris, I get the Hunter Mill District News from Supervisor Alcorn. Page 4 of the one that just came out talks about meeting on Tuesday, October 19th, and another one Monday, October 27th. Are those things that would be useful for us to watch as a means of understanding what's going on in Reston? Or do you think your monthly updates to us are adequate to cover everything?
I mean, absolutely. If you have an interest in what's going on in Reston, particularly because right now they've been talking about the land use sections of the update. Places that we have a lot of interest in, Association Drive and would be one area in particular. But some of the other things that are talked about are affordable housing credits, green building design, public works, and things like that. So it varies based on the agenda, whether or not I think members would have an interest. But there's a lively bit of discussion in each one of them, depending upon your areas. I do think that's probably been the best thing about this is COVID has made these meetings so public that and so recorded that if anyone had an interest, you can go back and watch them and actually and be involved in them in a way that I don't think many folks had a chance to be if you were coming home and a parent or someone who was taking care of somebody or just tired from work.
Thank you.
All right. Historic Fairfax Courthouse maintenance issues, Mr. Zellman.
It was a pleasure. Myself and Cheryl from the History Commission met with Heather Bollinger from the clerk's office and with the clerk of court, John Fry, to look at the historic courthouse. There had been a concern, I guess, because Ms. Bollinger noticed originally that some folks just kind of showed up to start doing some masonry and mortar work, and they were not any folks who were specialized in restoring historic structures, and they thankfully got sent away before they did anything. But looking at mostly the exterior of the structure, there's a lot of issues with a lot of the mortar, with the bricks. They have some areas where the birds are just really getting into the mortar between the bricks and eating it away. And there's no sort of imminent threat of any sort of structural collapse or anything like that, but certainly something down the road to think about. We also looked at the interior of the courthouse as well, which I have argued in before. It's a terrible courtroom for someone who's a lawyer because the acoustics are not good. And also learned how historically inaccurate the current representation of the interior of the courthouse is to what it looked like at one point in time. But what they're really looking for is our support for, if they were to approach the Board of Supervisors to seek a budget to make some repairs to the courthouse, they would want, our support to say that these repairs are necessary and that they're needed. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, Jason. Elise.
Just to chime in, the History Commission is writing a letter saying we support fixing all of that. And I think Denise sent us pictures. I think Laura sent us pictures a couple months ago, but Cheryl Petty has a little slideshow that shows the horrors of courthouse if you want to see it.
Yeah, I also have some pictures, and I'm happy to send those to Denise so that she has them, and if anybody wants to see them, I took some as well.
All right, Denise, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we met with Capital Facilities, and we requested that they come to the ARB as an information item about the demolition of the non-historic wings off the back of the courthouse. And we, during that meeting, we sort of put them on notice that we've been talking to the History Commission and the ARB, and that you would probably have questions for them about the conditions that we were just talking about. They also said that they were looking to identify funding for some of these repairs.
Yeah.
Thanks, Denise. Jason, does that sound like you might be willing to write a letter of support?
Happy to put a letter together, and something that I could put a letter together and then share it with Denise so that it can be shared with the board, certainly for approval before it were to go out.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right. There are no other questions on that. Let's go on to Lake Ann Condo Association structural issues. Ms. Swan.
Yes, have tried to refresh my memory because it happened last month. Lake Ann, my understanding is after some national treasury happened at Miami, some people in the county start to look into the lake and structure, and some of the structural issue is visible. So county pay for assessment report as a visual inspection to identify those items needed to be repaired. I believe is in 5 category as a life safety issue versus more like a cosmetic issue. And they did this report, and then they bring it to the Lakeland condominium residents, and they present it to them, and basically and try to get the idea of, try to reveal the issue and try to get the idea of how the residents would like to tackle this problem. Because the repair cost they projected is really high. But that's only, I believe it's about an hour meeting with residents, a very brief presentation on the report as a kind of a kickoff kind of meeting. So my understanding, walking away from that meeting, supervisor was conduct another committee as an action item. He tried to bring in the engineer and the professional and the condominium residents together in one table and try to brainstorm how they can get it resolved. Major thing is because the number of the cost of repairment is fairly high. So that is my understanding on that issue. I know the committees should be formed already. I have forwarded that information to Denise. Then after that, kind of getting really quiet. I did speak with residents I know 2 days ago. He was not in that committee, but he is in the committee of the Lakeland condominium. And what he mentioned to me is the condominium did have a 4-people committee looking into the report more in depth and start trying to figure out what the report is really about, what they can do, what they cannot do. They will meet regularly on that topic. So that is all the information I know at the moment. And I believe Denise or John, and I hope you two can share more information on that.
So I was going to say from last month too, I was also contacted by the supervisor about this property and the structural report, and now the $37 million price tag that the county's report raised. I also raised some questions to Laura and Denise about a historic structures report, or actually, it's because the infrastructure report analysis is not done from a historic property perspective at all. It's just a general engineer, it's just a general structures report and does not take into any consideration the fact that this is a National Register listed property.
You are right. There is no laser detected equipment performed. It's just a visual inspection.
But even with a video inspection done with the right person, you have a little bit more insight on it. So I raised the question to Denise and Laura too, and I think John did as well, about what expertise was being provided or conveyed to the county. How could we help support that initiative? And Denise, I don't know if you have any more info to share. going forward? Or John, it seemed like you might have some insight too you wanted to share.
Well, yeah, the one thing I would add is the collapse of the condo building in Miami that Samantha referenced. That's indicative now following $37 million in needed repairs in Lake Ann Center, not just Heron House, but the overall Lake Ann Center, is what happens when you have a condo board of homeowners who put off or defer or don't understand ongoing maintenance and upgrade needs of the buildings that they occupy. Everybody tends to look at their condo and they don't look at the big picture. And I think it tragically resulted in what happened in Miami. It's nowhere near that serious in Reston, but it does indicate that all of these concrete structured condos that went up all across the country, I keep thinking of up and down the east coast of the United States, all those high-rise condos on the waterfront, are potentially future Miami buildings. And that's a real danger. And so it's good that this is out in the open. I absolutely agree with Chris that this was done as from a construction standpoint as opposed to a preservation or conservation of historic materials standpoint. And I don't know what code they used, whether or not they could have used the existing building code as opposed to the international building code. Might have been more forgiving, but it is something that we should keep an eye on very closely.
Well, I was going to indicate that since Jason's writing one letter, I was actually contending on writing a letter about this as well, conveying the ARB's support in any initiative to help identify means to help preserve and protect and rehabilitate Lake Ann. Since this is a crown jewel of our HODs, and I thought that would be something of an olive branch from our behalf, since we're always behind the times, it seems. I want to keep us in front of this one in the sense that however much support we can provide. I even asked Denise and Laura, we've got traceries for an IDIQ. Can't they go do a historic structures report? We've got $26,000 in the bank. How much would that cost? You know, I mean, think however the ARB could convey our support. And I asked John the other day on a call if he knew of any folks in the AIA or any other groups that might, you know, where could we point the county towards resource wise? Because I think that's half the problem I'm hearing is folks are scratching their heads because this isn't colonial revival. You know, this is a unique type of architecture, and for some, it's an ugly type of architecture, which means it's harder to convince folks that it needs preservation. I think the folks in Reston, there's people believe it is worth supporting, but finding the right voices at the staff level sometimes can be a challenge, or finding expertise.
Yeah, Denise, is it possible for you to share a list of the current IDIQ architectural and engineering firms that the county has under contract? It may be that one of them is already capable of doing this.
Right, I can find that out for you, John. I can also mention that I reached out to DHR to see what technical resources they could offer, and just start a dialogue with them about this. I haven't heard back from one person was going to get back to me with engineers that they could recommend and consultants that they could recommend for this, as we're talking about this modern architecture. And then I also talked to Megan Melanant, and she's new. She took Elizabeth Toon's position with the preservation incentives at DHR. So I'm supposed to schedule a meeting with her and Aubrey von Lindern to discuss how they might help with the rehabilitation tax credits, and connect the supervisor and the task force with those opportunities. So I have both of those working with DHR, and it's just a slow process, but I will see what we can do from Fairfax County's side.
I just wonder what it would cost to do a historic structures report to supplement that engineering analysis being done. And if that, I know in the past with survey efforts, we've countered and offered money to match grants and other things.
Mhm.
You know, if the ARB can offer some financial support to that from our coffers, if that's possible, I would want to convey it. I'm in general thinking a letter that I would put would probably go directly to the supervisor and copy relevant folks, just indicating our general support on any initiatives they want to convey. We've got a diversity of membership that we have access to. But I want us not to be the person, you know, canary in the coal mine at the end. I want us to be the first person in the line here.
I think it's also just worth mentioning, you know, continuing to bring to the table that it is a historic overlay district, and everything that's done is going to have to, that requires a permit, is going to have to come through the Architectural Review Board. So
if there were one reason for you to watch the task force meetings, it would be because you continuously would hear me bring up that issue at almost every meeting about what the ARB's purview is over Lake Ann.
Yeah.
Elise.
John may have spoken to it this in the past, but the last round of rebar repair, the ARB was not contacted until it was already underway. And it was not, I believe, done in the best manner possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I actually remember that, at least. I think that was, they did concrete repair on the J-shaped building. And it was such a poor match that they painted the whole thing. And now we have painted concrete that historically was unpainted because they did a crummy job of matching the concrete when they did the patches. But subsequent to that, the county, when they redid the drain pipe under the plaza, and that affected the sculpture and all, they did consult with us on that. So, and I think it depends on who's doing the contracting for the work. The county was replacing its own pipes, and they consulted us. The Condo Association just went ahead and did it.
Yeah, we were contacted when public money was used many years ago to redo the bricks and the fountain and the concrete along the inlet, or whatever you want to call it, quay, Eco Alley. We were contacted extensively on that, but then not on the next repair that was indeed initiated by the Condo Association. Basically, I've been thinking Lake Ann has been a perennial problem because I don't think it was built to last. I think it was built as a spec building and not with what it turned out to be in mind at the time.
That could be an entire paper in itself, Elise. Samantha, it sounds like you might have another comment.
I hope I can put it in the right way. My understanding from the resident I speak to is while they have a meeting, they do struggling to in two parts. One is they do not feel the report they see was done right. The information was very very preliminary. That is what they believe. The second part is they are struggling try to find the funding, particularly in terms of state or federal level. That is the feeling I get from them. So I was thinking, well, could we talk with them, offer our expertise or the information we know? So I don't know. We has been talking about consulting party. I don't know how it translates into this situation. If like, for instance, like if they ask me to join their meeting, could I go? And what do we do? Or could I bring someone from our board that could best help them in terms of offering information? Or I need
So I
advice?
think I can respond to that. So in the past, members have provided guidance and assistance to applicants bringing in projects. Mr. Burns, Mr. Kalinsky, I think Ms. Orr has in the past. I know Mr. Plumpy has. Frequently, there's been asked for assistance from membership about various questions for applications coming in. And so it's not unheard of for an ARB member to lend their expertise, particularly when we know a project's going to be coming forward, because we want to help that applicant. We have to be careful about numbers of members helping, because if more than three of us come together, it's it forms a meeting, and suddenly there are all these public involvement requirements. But members providing support to those entities aren't usually things that we have issues with. Laura, Denise, John, in the past, I know you've done it. I know Joe's done it. It's usually been on an ad hoc nature, and it's more a preliminary insight that we're providing. You're not the will of the board necessarily, but if you're an expert, like I know that's happened with Joe in landscape questions, he's provided his wisdom to help someone when they come to the ARB, and that assistance has usually helped an application get through to approval.
I think, Smith, that's also really important, because from what we've seen on some of these, they're kind of emergency nature. So they might be coming to the ARB quite fast and furious. So if I think it's appropriate, as Chris said, for you to do that, but also to give us that insider knowledge, because to be honest, sometimes county staff is the last to know that something's happening. So I think it'd be extremely beneficial if you were able to.
That is, to get to the letter I'm thinking about, Laura, is part of that is conveying that effort of support that we could bring, and why it would be good to bring us in sooner, because we don't want to be the roadblock to an approval for an application for an emergency repair. But if they're going to come in and replace concrete and paint it over, or do something in a inappropriate manner, then they're merely just kicking a can down the road to future spalling and future failure that they just don't clearly have the expertise on. And we don't want to seem like we're being, stymieing that. We want to give them good advice.
My understanding right now is supervisor has his own committee formed right there, and the condominium themselves have their own committee forming there. I'm not quite sure they are parallel dialogue, or they are talking to each other, and I'm not feel we are connected to either of the committee. So it just
But it sounds like you're making all the more case that a letter that goes to the supervisor, copies the condo association and all the other relevant parties, and highlights, hey, we're here to help both of you. You that live there and you that govern. I think I'll take a book play from Mr. Zellman, then I'll start working on something and try to have it ready for y'all by the next meeting, unless we want to have it done sooner. I'm happy to put it out sooner too, conveying that well.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. If there are no more comments on that one, we're going to stay in Reston and go to Reston rezoning cases. Isaac Newton Square, Phase 2 survey. Is that you, John? You're muted.
There you go. You may have well wished that I had stayed muted, but anyway. Denise facilitated a meeting. Samantha and I attended with the developers and traceries who wrote the initial survey of the Isaac Newton Square. Laura had shared that a while ago with us, and when I read it and reviewed it, I looked at the historical data the tracers had compiled, and I thought it was very good, very thorough, but their conclusions that they drew from that data were very different from what I had drawn. And so we had a meeting, and in the end, the consensus at the end of the meeting was that the developer was willing to do some HABs type documentation like we're hoping to get for Association Drive, And they already agreed that they would put in some wayside exhibits, some interpretive exhibits in the space once it's redeveloped. But essentially, all the buildings are going to go. I had some reservations about that, and I thought about that. I've been thinking about that a lot since then, and I had a long talk with you, Chris, about that. And I think the problem with Isaac Newton Square is, Chris put it succinctly, it's just not as attractive as Association Drive. It's a big parking lot with buildings around the periphery, and so it doesn't have the same cachet. And this redevelopment, although it has an affordable housing component, they're probably going to use the low-income housing tax credits, which is not sufficient to trigger Section 106 review, like happened with the One University Plaza building right outside of Fairfax City, just off the George Mason campus. So we don't have that hook to force them into federal compliance. And so this is one, and my ultimate conclusion was that we have lost the education battle back in 2013 when the comp plan was revised to acknowledge the county intent to have higher density in the vicinity of the new Silver Line metro stations. That went past me on the radar. I did not see it coming. It was done, the meetings were over, it was passed and in force. And that guidance is what doomed the API building. That guidance is what's going to hurt us with Association Drive. And that same guidance is what's going to hurt with Isaac Newton Square. We had a good, frank discussion, but that was the end result of it. And I think the ultimate aim I would hope we might, or ultimate result I hope that we might get out of this is that we can get all of the original areas of Reston put on the Fairfax County inventory. So if anything comes up, that at least triggers some attention from DPZ or DPD as to what's going on. Because right now, the most at-risk sections of Reston are the least protected sections of Reston. And that's my take from what's going on at Isaac Newton Square.
John and I also talked about that everyone's going to get assigned a building in Reston to write an inventory form for. Yeah, but John brought up all the points perfectly. That part of this is the perennial challenge we're facing, that we don't know where everything is. We don't have an adequate level of survey done, and that even when we did a survey in Reston, we only grazed the surface. And that obviously the more initiatives we can highlight that needs to be done. And I'll just say I've been trying to emphasize that in the comp plan update language. I'm supposed to meet with county staff at some point to talk about what I put in there and see if they actually are willing to accept it. They might not. And I think that's another thing I brought up, John, earlier, is that I'm pushing the supervisor staff to go, how are we sharing that update with boards, authorities, and commissions, so that those groups, because there are a lot of groups that would have an interest in what happens in those, not just us. How would they get a chance to provide their insight, even if it's not to object necessarily, but to at least opine on it? I don't know if that's going to come to any fruition or not, but you're right. Right now, we're in a situation where if the property isn't on the inventory and it isn't identified, then it's in this limbo that has no real protection for itself.
I will point out, though, that Isaac Newton Square has had a lot of protection, has had a lot of staff involvement in the development plans. So it's not like staff, DPD staff didn't know what it was. Denise has spent a lot of time over the last, how many years?
3 years.
3 years working with them. So it's yes, it's a lost cause, but she's been working to mitigate it as best as possible. And the History Commission also was briefed, and we tried to mitigate it as best as possible too. I asked for sympathetic architecture instead of just product.
Yeah. I think there was another suggestion that the new site be actually named in recognition of that area too, that it doesn't get a off the wall name it actually gets a name reflective of the history of the location, not just whatever place that people pick from a random Excel sheet nowadays.
Yeah, that's what Elise said. I would second in that if these buildings are to go, we should ask that they put back something better. That should be the design standard we should ask them to adopt. I said that to the Folger Pratt folks that came in to talk to us about Association Drive, and I could see the guy in the back of the room, his eyes got real big, like, so I kind of threw down that gauntlet, and why can't we ask for excellence? If you're going to tear down part of the history of Reston, put up something that people are going to revere and look to say, yeah, okay, we lost some history, but look at what we got. And if it's just another podium building, no, that doesn't cut it.
Thanks, John. All right, let's move on to our rolling lineup of HOD updates, starting with Holland Hills HOD update. Laura.
Still here. So Holland Hills, we just completed a very successful poll in the neighborhood that ran went to every property owner and went from I think it was September 7th through the 30th, so they had a couple weeks to get back to us. And we use a new platform called Public Input, which we're hoping to use more of in the future, that allowed you to take this electronic poll online, and then it does all of the analysis for us, so we don't have to calculate who said yes, who said no. So right now we're going through vetting the data, making sure there's no duplicates, and then sending it to the supervisor's office for his use. We're hoping to have the data kind of, checked and rechecked by the end of this month, and then hopefully be able to make an announcement next month on the results of that poll.
Great.
Laura, I'll give you a heads up. In the Holland Hills Forum, it's a community like chat thing. It was like trying to stuff the ballot box for prom queen. People are talking about, if I do it from a different computer, can I do a second vote, and doing also so. Yeah, you must be aware of that, but it was quite a scene. People talking about how they can stuff the ballot box.
People signing up for VPNs and they don't even know what VPN stands for.
Yeah.
I have a new appreciation. I only had 500 votes basically to deal with, and the amount of duplication and trying to put in one answer and then questions and then not getting, like, it was, and that was only 500. So I'm like, I keep thinking about like elections, and I'm like, holy moly, no wonder why we have like, I mean, I only had 500 people, but Lord. But yeah, hopefully we'll get some results out soon. I know that I've gotten screenshots of the forum, John. I try to keep arm's length from it, to be honest.
Thanks, Laura. All right. Wellington at River Farm. Is there anything more to say? I was going to say, I think you've told us everything. Look for a action item next month. That's exciting. Home Runs Acres HOD.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, Denise, you want to give the update?
Well, go ahead, Laura.
Okay. So one of the announcements is that Denise is going to be taking over the reins for Homes Run Acres. We're still kind of in transition, but we're looking to, we're redeveloping a schedule right now, trying to pick up where we left off, bring us up to speed, and hopefully having a work group meeting in the next couple of months. But we are still in the review and analysis. They're a little bit further ahead at this point than Holland Hills was, because we got a design guidelines team on earlier. So they'll have a longer chance to review the design guidelines, which I think is really helpful, because as we all know, that's kind of the rubber hitting the road for the homeowner in the HODs. So they'll have a lot more time to review that. We've gotten a lot of good feedback. You heard Sarah say earlier, some of the changes to the overall design guidelines and the other HODs have come out of those conversations. So I think we're in good shape, but hopefully moving starting the work group up again, and then moving forward, hopefully next spring with community meetings, outreach, findings.
Great. Excellent news to hear. Any other discussion or updates or reports? All right. Correspondence and announcements, Denise?
There were no correspondence as far as I'm aware.
All right. Old business. You see any old business? Any new business? Giving John a pause. John usually has new business occasionally. Nope, none from him. Well, then I would look
Does
for
not
a
look
motion
so.
to adjourn, if that's the case.
So moved.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 See you all next month, everyone. Stay well.
Oh,
Take care.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry. Did we just remember it's Wednesday, November 10th?
Wednesday. Yes, remember it will be Wednesday. So we'll send an email out.
Yes, definitely.
Peace.
Good night, everyone.
Night, everybody.
Aye.
Force be with you.
Hey Denise, did you and Marcia talk? This is Kay.